Welcome to a journey that will challenge everything you thought you knew about success, dreams, and the power of second chances. Before we dive into today's incredible story, we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop a comment below and let us know. And if you love stories that inspire, empower, and leave you thinking long after the video ends, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss what we've got coming up next. It's something truly special. The neon lights of the bustling coastal city flickered like 1,000 stars against the darkened sky, creating a surreal glow over the cityscape. Nash Walker, a self-made billionaire in his early 40s, sat in his sleek penthouse office, his eyes fixed on the skyline. The deal he had just closed was worth millions, another feather in his cap as he solidified his empire. Yet, despite the financial triumph, an unfamiliar emptiness gnawed at him. The success he had once dreamed of felt strangely hollow. His assistant, Natalie, entered with a confident smile, holding a stack of paperwork. "Mr. Walker, your flight to Texas is ready." "Should I prepare the jet?" she asked. Nash didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared out the window, watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. After a long pause, he made a decision. "Cancel the flight," he said, his voice firm with an unexpected resolve. "I'm staying a bit longer." Natalie raised an eyebrow in surprise. "But sir, the meeting in Texas is critical." "I'll handle it from here," Nash interrupted, his mind already set. He stood up, feeling an unfamiliar restlessness stir within him. As he walked to the door, his thoughts drifted far away, to a place he had been trying to forget for years, the small town of Riverside, where it all began. The black luxury car glided smoothly through the city streets, the hum of the engine the only sound in the quiet interior. Nash sat in the back, his thoughts drifting far from the corporate world he had built. He had spent years focused on success, pushing forward relentlessly. But now, as he drove away from the skyscrapers and the bright lights of the city, a different kind of feeling consumed him. The weight of his past seemed to pull at him, as if the city itself was trying to remind him of something he had long buried. Nash's mind wandered back to Riverside, the small town where he had grown up, a place that felt both like home and a prison. He hadn't been back in over 10 years. Back then, he was just a boy with big dreams and limited means, trying to find a way out. The town had felt suffocating, the streets filled with memories of struggle and uncertainty. But he had promised himself that one day, when he had everything, he would return, not as the boy who had left, but as someone who had built an empire. As the car neared Riverside, the familiar sights slowly came into view, the rundown street corner where he used to sell newspapers just to make ends meet, the library where he spent hours reading business magazines he could never afford. Each landmark seemed like a ghost, reminding him of who he had been and how far he had come. Then, as the car turned a corner, Nash's heart skipped a beat. There it was, Maggie's Diner. It looked the same, as if time had stood still. The flickering neon sign outside was a faint echo of the past, and the worn-out red booths inside had not changed. A strange sense of nostalgia washed over him, mixed with an unsettling feeling he couldn't quite explain. He had promised himself long ago, as a teenager, that he would never return to this place until he had everything. And now, here he was, standing in front of it, just as he had vowed. Nash exhaled deeply, trying to push the memories aside, but they lingered, heavy and unavoidable. "Charles, stop here," Nash ordered, his voice distant, as though he was speaking to someone else. His driver complied without question, and the car came to a slow halt in front of the diner. Nash stepped out and walked toward the door. The familiar sound of the bell jingling above the entrance greeted him as he entered. Instantly, the warm scent of coffee and grilled food hit him, a smell that brought back memories of simpler, more innocent times. The atmosphere inside was cozy and timeless, just as he remembered. He made his way to the corner booth, the very same one where he had spent countless nights dreaming of a life he could never afford. Nash sat down, his eyes scanning the room, his mind flooded with memories of the past. He remembered the boy he had once been, the boy who had dreamed of a future beyond the confines of Riverside. As he stared out the window, the weight of his past seemed to press down on him even more. The life he had built was not the life he had imagined. There was a hole inside of him, a longing for something he couldn't put into words. Nash closed his eyes for a moment, as if to steady himself before the next wave of memories came rushing in. Nash's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice that broke through the haze of his memories. "What can I get you, sir?" He looked up, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The woman before him was familiar, too familiar. She had dark brown hair pulled back into a messy bun, her eyes hidden behind a veil of exhaustion. She wore the same uniform that had never changed, the one that reminded him of the many times he had seen it as a boy. But it wasn't just the uniform that made her seem familiar. It was her presence, the way her eyes met his, as if she knew him even though they hadn't seen each other in years. It was Sophie Bennett. His old friend, the one who had always dreamed of something bigger than Riverside, something beyond this town. But now, as he studied her face, Nash could see the weight of time had taken its toll. Sophie no longer had the sparkle in her eyes that once made her shine brighter than anyone else in the room. Instead, they were dull, filled with a kind of resignation he had never imagined seeing in her. Sophie didn't seem to recognize him at first. She blinked a few times, the recognition coming slowly. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Nash's heart raced as he leaned forward, searching her face for signs of the girl he once knew. "Westwood High, class of 2012, he said softly. Recognition flashed in her eyes. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed the notepad down and sat the cup of coffee before him. "Adam." "Nash?" she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. A smile tugged at Nash's lips, but it wasn't the confident smile of the successful billionaire he had become. No, it was the smile of the boy who had never forgotten her, who had once shared dreams and plans for the future. "The one and only," he said, his voice soft. Sophie stared at him for a long moment, her face slowly shifting from confusion to something more complicated. "You're the Nash Walker? The billionaire?" she asked, disbelief evident in her tone. Nash nodded, though the pride he should have felt was absent. Instead, an unexpected ache settled in his chest. This wasn't the reunion he had imagined. The woman in front of him, the bright-eyed girl who had once been the heart of their town, was now a shadow of herself. It was almost as if life had taken its toll on her long before her time. "I never thought I'd see you again," Sophie said softly, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You made it out." "I always knew you would." Nash's gaze softened. "I didn't expect you to be here," he said, the weight of the years between them settling over him. Sophie, on the other hand, smiled a hollow smile. "Well, some of us don't get second chances, do we?" As they spoke, Nash realized how far apart their paths had diverged. The girl who had once dreamed of a life beyond Riverside had ended up here, working at Maggie's diner, while he had built an empire. It was almost too much for him to process. The way Sophie had once been full of ambition and now seemed to carry the burdens of a life she hadn't chosen weighed heavily on him. They talked for hours, but Nash could sense that something was wrong. Sophie had closed herself off, her demeanor now quiet and guarded. There was a deeper story, something she wasn't telling him. Finally, unable to keep quiet any longer, Nash spoke the words that had been on his mind since the moment they had reconnected. "Sophie, what happened to you?" His voice was gentle but full of concern. "You were going to change the world." She hesitated, looking away for a moment as though weighing whether to share her truth. Then, with a deep sigh, she began to speak, her voice trembling with the weight of the past. Sophie took a deep breath, and her eyes welled with tears as she began to share the painful truth. "My father passed away when I was in my second year at Harvard," she said, her voice shaky. "After that, things fell apart. My mother got sick, and I had to drop out to take care of her. My little brother was still in school, and I had to provide for them. So, I took any job I could find." Her voice wavered as she paused, and Nash sat in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. Sophie had never been the type to give up. She had always been the one to strive for more, to dream of a life that was bigger than the small town they had grown up in. Yet here she was, trapped in a cycle of sacrifice and hardship. Now I'm here, Sophie continued, her eyes distant. Working at Maggie's diner. And I'm stuck. Nash's chest tightened. The girl he had once admired, the one with the fire in her eyes, had been broken by circumstances beyond her control. She had given up her dreams to care for her family, and in doing so, she had lost herself. Nash couldn't imagine the pain she had endured. The image of Sophie as a bright-eyed college student with big dreams seemed so far removed from the woman sitting across from him now. His heart went out to her, but there was something else, something he couldn't quite place. "You're still here," Nash said softly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He couldn't understand how someone like Sophie, someone with so much potential, could end up in a place like this, living a life she hadn't chosen. Sophie chuckled bitterly, shaking her head. "Yeah, I guess some dreams just aren't meant to come true." The words hung in the air, heavy and final, like a door that had closed for good. Nash's mind raced. He was a billionaire, someone who could make anything happen with just a phone call. Yet here was Sophie, the girl who had once dreamed of changing the world, now struggling just to make ends meet. How could he have let this happen? How could he have let her slip through the cracks while he built his empire? But as much as he wanted to fix everything with money, Nash knew that wasn't the answer. He wasn't just a businessman, he was someone who believed in second chances. And Sophie deserved one. The conversation shifted, and Nash found himself coming up with a plan, an idea that felt both radical and necessary. He couldn't just throw money at her problems, he wanted to give her a real opportunity, a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. Sophie had always had potential, she just needed a chance to unlock it. The next day, as Nash sat at his desk in his office, the idea began to take shape. He would offer Sophie something more than just a job. He would offer her the opportunity to grow, to lead, to finally take control of her future. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. He didn't know if she would accept. But he knew he couldn't stand by and do nothing. Sophie had always been someone who believed in possibilities, and he would be damned if he let her believe that life had nothing left to offer. 2 days later, Sophie found a black envelope tucked under the windshield wiper of her car. The elegant gold ink on the front read, "Meet me at 9 a.m., Foster Enterprises." Her heart raced as she opened the letter, a mix of curiosity and anxiety filling her chest. She had no idea what to expect, but something deep inside told her that this was important. When Sophie arrived at Foster Enterprises the next morning, she was stunned by the sheer luxury of the place. The sleek, modern design of the building was a far cry from the life she had known. The polished marble floors, the expensive artwork adorning the walls, the view of the city from the top floor, all of it felt surreal, as if she had stepped into a dream. As she walked through the halls, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was out of place. This wasn't the world she belonged to, or at least, that's what she had always believed. But now, standing in the heart of it, Sophie realized that Nash had built something far beyond just a business empire. He had created a world of opportunity, a world that seemed just within reach for someone like her. When she entered Nash's office, she was taken aback by the sheer magnitude of it. The massive desk, the panoramic view of the city, and the sense of power that radiated from every corner of the room, all of it made her feel small, yet hopeful. Nash stood up when she walked in, his face softening when he saw her. "Sophie," he said, his voice steady but filled with warmth. "I want to offer you a position at my company." Sophie blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "A position?" she echoed, her voice trembling slightly. Nash nodded, a serious expression on his face. He slid a contract across the desk toward her. "Not just any position," he continued. "I want you to take on a managerial role. 6 figures, full benefits. And I'll cover your mother's medical bills and your brother's education. Whatever you need, it's all yours." Sophie's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had been waiting for a chance like this, but the reality of it was overwhelming. why are you doing this?" Sophie asked, her voice barely a whisper. Nash looked at her with a seriousness that surprised her. "Because you deserve a second chance, Sophie. You were always meant for more than this small town. And I believe in you. I've seen your potential. You don't have to settle for anything less than what you deserve." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes as the weight of his words settled in. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't just the money or the job that moved her, but the belief that someone still saw the best in her. Sophie sat there, staring at the contract in front of her, her hands trembling. This was the moment she had dreamed of. She had been given an opportunity, a chance to build a future that wasn't defined by her past. But as much as she wanted to take the leap, doubts crept into her mind. Before she could speak, Nash interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "Sophie, you don't have to decide right now. But I want you to know that this is real. I'm offering you a chance to start over, to build something that's yours. No one is going to hand you a second chance like this again." Sophie's mind raced, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over her future. She was no longer the girl who had been trapped by circumstances. She was someone who could make her own destiny. But the question remained, was she ready to take that step? The next few days were a whirlwind for Sophie. The offer Nash had extended to her seemed too good to be true, yet every time she thought about it, a feeling of uncertainty tugged at her heart. She had lived so long in survival mode, fighting just to get by, that the idea of thriving in a world that had always seemed out of reach was daunting. At night, she lay awake, replaying Nash's words in her head. "You deserve a second chance." He had meant every word, and Sophie could feel it in her bones. But how could she leave everything behind? How could she step into a life where the stakes were so high? She had spent so many years playing it safe, choosing the comfort of familiarity over the unknown. But was she ready to change? As the days passed, Sophie found herself growing more and more conflicted. The job offer was everything she had dreamed of, a real chance to start fresh, to build something meaningful, to escape the cycles of struggle that had defined her life. But the fear of failure lingered. What if she wasn't enough? What if she let down everyone who had ever believed in her, including Nash? One afternoon, Sophie sat in the diner, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, lost in thought. She stared at the faded menu on the wall, the same menu that had greeted her every day for years. It was in that moment that she realized just how much she had changed. The girl who had once dreamed of escaping this town had become a woman who was now faced with the ultimate test of her own courage. But she wasn't alone. As she sat there, the door to the diner opened, and an old regular entered. He was an older man, with a warm smile and a kind face. He'd been a regular at the diner for as long as Sophie could remember. He noticed her sitting alone and made his way over to her booth. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, Sophie," he said, his voice gentle. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just thinking," she replied softly. The man nodded. "Well, thinking is important. But don't let it hold you back. You've got a chance here, kid. Don't waste it." His words hit her harder than she expected. This wasn't just a random piece of advice. It was a reminder that she wasn't just living for herself anymore. There were people who cared about her, who had seen her potential long before she had. Nash believed in her, and this man, even though he didn't know all the details, believed in her too. Sophie's heart swelled with a mix of gratitude and resolve. She had spent so much time being afraid of change, but now, for the first time, she saw it for what it truly was, an opportunity. An opportunity to stop hiding, to stop playing it safe, and to finally become the woman she had always been meant to be. That night, she couldn't sleep again, but this time, it wasn't because of doubt. It was because she knew what she had to do. The next morning, she called Nash's office. "I'm ready," she said when his assistant answered. Nash was on the line a moment later. "Sophie." His voice was warm, but he didn't push. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steady. "I want to take that chance. I want to build something real." Nash's relief was palpable. "Welcome to Foster Enterprises, Sophie. You won't regret it." And in that moment, Sophie knew that she had just taken the first step into a new life, one where she wasn't afraid of the unknown anymore. She wasn't just stepping into a job, she was stepping into her own future. The first few weeks at Foster Enterprises were a whirlwind for Sophie. Every day brought new challenges, new faces, and new opportunities. But what stood out the most was the way she was treated. Nash had never once looked at her as a project or a charity case. He saw her as an equal, someone with potential, someone who was capable of great things. And for the first time in a long while, Sophie believed it too. Nash wasn't just a boss, he was a mentor, a guide, and, in many ways, a friend. His unwavering support gave her the confidence to face challenges she never thought she could. She found herself making decisions, leading teams, and solving problems with a level of skill she hadn't known she had in her. Her confidence grew with every success, no matter how small. The woman who had once doubted her ability to succeed was now taking charge of her own future. But it wasn't just the work that changed Sophie, it was the person she was becoming. She had started to believe in herself again, to understand that her worth wasn't defined by her past struggles or her family's sacrifices. She wasn't just the girl from Riverside anymore. She was someone who had earned her place, someone who had fought for everything she had. One evening, as Sophie stayed late at the office, going over a project, Nash walked in. He smiled at her, a proud smile that said everything. "You're doing great," he said, leaning against the doorframe. Sophie looked up, her face lighting up with a sense of accomplishment. "Thanks, Nash. I couldn't have done this without you." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, Sophie. You did this. I just gave you the chance." And that was the truth. The chance to prove herself was all she had needed. Nash had given her the opportunity, but it was her determination, her hard work, and her refusal to let her past define her that had made all the difference. Sophie had found her own strength, and with it, a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. As time passed, Sophie's life continued to change. She no longer had to worry about bills, about surviving. She was thriving, not just financially, but emotionally and personally. She had built a new life for herself, one where she could dream big again, where she could finally live the life she had always imagined. One day, after a successful meeting with clients, Sophie stood by the window of her office, looking out at the city below. She thought about how far she had come, how much had changed. She wasn't just looking out at the city, she was looking at her future. A future that was no longer uncertain or clouded by doubt. Sophie had found her place in the world. She had taken control of her life, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the strength to face them. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Nash, yes, but more importantly, she had herself. And for the first time in years, she felt truly free. As Sophie stood in the quiet of her office, reflecting on how far she had come, she realized that the most important lesson she had learned wasn't about money, success, or power. It was about the value of believing in yourself. Life had thrown her countless challenges, and for years, she had doubted her worth, trapped by the circumstances she couldn't control. But when she stopped seeing herself as a victim of her past, and started seeing herself as someone who had the power to change her future, everything shifted. The lesson Sophie learned was simple yet profound: your past does not define you. Your choices do. In life, there will always be obstacles, some of them are unavoidable. But the way we choose to face those obstacles, how we decide to move forward, and the belief we hold in our ability to overcome them, that is what shapes our future. Sophie's journey was never about escaping her past, but about embracing her power to create a new story for herself. For anyone feeling stuck or unsure of their future, Sophie's story teaches us a valuable truth: don't let the weight of your past prevent you from moving forward. Whether it's a career change, a personal goal, or a dream that seems unreachable, start by believing that you have the ability to build the life you want. It may take time, but by taking one small step at a time, you can change the course of your life, just like Sophie did.